How can you apply the principles of elite training to your everyday life? This is the Leaders of Transformation podcast. And on this show, we interview difference makers and world changers who are disrupting for good. Thank you for listening. I'm Nicole Jansen, your host, and our guest today is Dr. Jansen Richardson. Jansen is a world champion BMX bike racer, a Pan Am Games gold medalist, an Olympic psychologist, a speaker, and high performance coach. And today, we're going to be talking about how to overcome your limitations, how to get unstuck, play to your strengths, and develop a mindset of a champion in your everyday life. Now, before we dive in, I do want to do a shout out to Corey Zigvaldeson. He's actually the one that introduced me to Jansen, and Corey is the founder of the HOP Institute. So a little shout out for him and his organization, what he does. He specializes in higher order performance. And he was a guest on this show in episode 230, which was like a long time ago, but it was a great episode. Highly recommend you check that out. He's an amazing leader and difference maker. And one more thing is that our podcast is actually brought to you by my coaching and training company. So if you are a leader who wants to be better, do better, make a greater impact in the world, you can go to leadersoftransformation.com/coaching. And you can learn more about the services that I provide. And if you are interested, you can actually schedule a free consult with me, a 45-minute private consultation. We can have a conversation about where you're at, where you want to go, and what's it going to take to get you there. And so my scheduling link is on that page. All right, let's bring our guest on. Jansen, welcome, Leaders of Transformation. We're excited to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure. And you know what? I love talking about elite performance and sports and all that good stuff. So I was looking forward to this conversation. I know it's going to be energized and also very informative. And because I know that our conversation, even previously talking about its mindset, but then there's more than that. It's not just about thinking good thoughts. It's more than that. And it's really important for us, I think, especially now, people who are, dealing with all the stuff that's going on in the world, to be able to have the right focus and to be able to, in our everyday life, perform at the highest levels, depending on what we're doing. So before we even get into all of that, let's talk about your background. You're in BMX racing, very, very successful. So congratulations on your success there. How did you get into that?
So pretty random, actually, BMX racing. It's not something that most people would think is a profession. But yeah, my brother was into skateboarding at the time, and we're talking early 80s, like AD 80. And there was a skate park. My dad took him to the skate park to go check it out. And next to the skate park was a BMX track. And my brother said, I want to try that. So he did, and he found some success early on. And then I was just the little brother trying to be like him. And I said, I want to do that too. He rolled his eyes, but I got to do it anyway. And it stuck. And even at the beginning, it didn't even matter that I was painfully bad at it, because I was. I just liked being out there and having fun. And my brother was the good one, the fast one. And so that was good enough for me. I figured I could just bask in his glory. And I just stuck with it. It's just something that I always did and enjoyed. And then I got a taste for winning probably around 12 or 13-ish. I started winning locally. And then I thought maybe I want to try my hand at kind of taking it up to the state level and the national level. And my dad said, well, if I'm going to take you around and travel to do this, I want to see you practice. We didn't call it training back then. It was called practicing. So I had to show him that I was serious. So I made sure that every night I was on my rollers. It's kind of like a spin bike, but they're rollers. You have to hold your own balance and stay balanced with them. And that was that. And so I was committed, and I just went up the chain, I guess, and turned pro. I actually turned pro because I thought I had to quit. Because I was a senior in high school, and I was thinking, everyone was kind of telling me how you're going to work, or if you're going to go to school, you have to work, and how can you race and go to school? But then I got to school and I realized I'd rather race than work. So I made that happen as best I could, and all the money that I earned at a race would pay for the next one. And then, lo and behold, the timing was right, and it became a 15-year career.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah. And you were actually the youngest. You were telling me that you were the youngest, and then you were ultimately at the end when you retired, one of the
Was the
oldest or the
oldest. Yeah.
oldest.
So that's, yeah.
So, so that's a
Yeah. So,
long, yeah, it's a long
yeah,
time.
it's
What's the
interesting.
mindset
So,
that you needed to have to be able to do
well,
that?
so yeah, we could get into that. So it's interesting. So when you're a kid and it's the 80s or even the 90s, there was these things called magazines, and they would show up
You're
monthly.
funny. You were like, what is that?
Yeah, they would show up monthly, and they had pictures and words in them on paper. But no, I would see the BMX magazines, and you would see California and Sunshine. But then every year, there was this, people would go off to some other country, the Netherlands or England or wherever, for the World Championships. And I would see kids in my age group getting this opportunity, and I just kept thinking, I could I could beat him, and I could beat him, or I've beaten him before. And I just always felt like, man, I really think I can win that race. I really think I can win a World Championships. So oddly enough, I never got to race a World Championship in the amateur ranks. I went as a pro. My first World Championships was in Detroit. Um, what was it? Waterford Oaks, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit, in 1994. And yeah, at that time, I had turned pro in 90, technically 92, but 93. So I was one of the youngest guys in the class at that time, and I won. So we raced two bikes, and one was called a cruiser, one was called a 20-inch. That's just the size of the wheel. I won on the cruiser class, and it was really surreal. I became world champion, and I was the youngest guy. So the only thing that I can point to back then, or at least looking back, I should say, the only thing that I could point to was the belief that I had that I could do it. Obviously a desire, but there was a really strong belief that I can win this. I always felt that, which is funny because I'd won a national amateur title before. I won a few races here and there. I was good, but I just felt like on that one day I could show up that day and win it, and that's what happened. And then slow forward to 2007, I'm the old guy in the class, in the pro class, and then I get a call to race to go to the Pan Am Games. So because BMX became an Olympic sport, our debut was 2008, and so we were a Pan Am sport because the Pan Am Games is every 4 years, the year before the Olympics. And it was interesting. The World Championships was a couple weeks after that, so I wasn't even the first pick to go. They called a few people. They called a few people. Like, no, I'm getting ready for the World Championships or this or that. And it was so funny that people were turning this opportunity. And I was like, this is an Olympic sanctioned event. Like this, like if people don't know what BMX is, they do know what a Pan Am Games is. Like this actually goes down in the actual record books of sport, like global sport. So there was that. I was kind of the third or probably like fourth or fifth in line to get the call. And then the other reason was I'm good at paperwork. So I went to school the whole time. So they were like, well, if Jason can get his stuff, they're like, if anyone can get their stuff together, Jason can get it. Because back then you had to get a visa and you had to do your shots and all these things to go to Brazil. So, and that one I won. And so I always say, when I won the World Championships, I couldn't explain how I did it. When I won the Pan Am Games, I knew exactly how I did it. And that all that process and all that timing, and I mean, everything just lined up perfectly for that moment. And oddly enough, the only lap that I won at the Pan Am Games was the final. So that was pretty cool. And that's it. Kind of, I guess we can get into the mindset stuff too, but the one thing that I draw for, a lot of things I draw from that, but what I draw from the Pan Am Games was the fact that I couldn't avoid that not winning would, let me put it this way. The only thing that would have made that trip worth it for me was to win it. Yeah. Because it wasn't the Olympics. Okay. And it was, and a top three is great because they're, it's a medal. But at the end of the day, if you're going to go to like the almost Olympics, you probably should win that, right? And this is kind of what my thinking is. And the Olympics weren't guaranteed for me because I'm like back in school. I'm literally becoming Dr. Jason Richardson as this is happening. And so I always say there's a responsibility to what you want. And what happens is we tend to negotiate ourselves out of what we want or out of winning. But that week, there was no denying how much not only did I want, and I mean, not want like, oh, it'd be nice to win the lottery, or, it'd be cool to have a Mercedes. No, like I wanted it like, like an insomniac wanted sleep, that kind of thing. It was unavoidable. And so that's what I was working toward. And that's what it culminated in. And so it's really like the work is dealing with the responsibility to what you want. That was the work all week. And I remember that. And it was just so interesting because you're in the village and there's a lot. And let me tell you something about an Olympic, because I've been in an Olympic village as a psychologist, but there is so much energy and activity in the village. There's a lot of it can drain you if you allow it. It can distract you if you allow it. It can overwhelm
a lot of activities,
you.
a lot of things to do, or just
let
a
me
lot
tell
of
you
just
something.
strictly
So
energy?
yes, activity, people. I mean, it's information overload. Everything.
Yeah.
I mean, from the cafeteria to, oh my gosh, that's actually a professional. That's an NBA player to. So that, and then there's all this people watching, and then kind of looking at people and just, oh, well, maybe they're a wrestler, maybe they're a rower, I don't know. But then when the sun goes down, there's a lot of open doors opening and closing at night too. So when I say activity, there's activity going on in these villages, a lot. But I remember I had a paper to write, and I had my program for the week and a very specific plan. And just sticking to that plan. And then every step I got closer towards racing, or even in qualifications, it was like, okay. Like I'm literally stepping in further and further, deeper and deeper into the pool, knowing that there's going to be a point where I'm probably, I don't want to say underwater, but it's going to be at the limit of taking my last breath. And that's where the job is really to keep doing the same thing emotionally, mentally, habitually, so that you can allow yourself to do what you know how to do when the time comes.
Yeah. Wow, there's so much there. I think about Napoleon Hill. Early on, you were talking about belief, right? And Napoleon Hill has a quote that says, "Whatever a man or a woman can conceive and believe, he can achieve." So you got to conceive it, and then you got to believe it, and then you can achieve it from there. And so a lot of times, like you said, we negotiate ourselves out of it through our own beliefs. And then when you were just talking about there, I was thinking about how important it is when the rubber meets the road. Are you always on 24/7? No, not necessarily, but you're staying focused, because nobody's perfect is what I'm saying. So nobody's perfect, right? But when the rubber meets the road, when it's time to be on, you can pull that out and be on. And I know you and we've talked about the Drive to Survive series on Netflix, and you watch some of these drivers, and it's like, what's going on with them? Who's coaching them? Because their head's not in the game, and they have the ability. And how often, we're talking about overcoming our limitations, getting unstuck, how often do we see people that are talented, that have all the ability, but when it comes down to the game, they take themselves out? And I know that for myself as a certainly not anywhere near being where you were at in terms of an athlete. But when I was young, I would win all the time. And then I had this particular situation that happened in life, and it really caused me to second guess myself. And what was crazy is then I went into another sport, and I'd always been strong in competition. But then what I noticed, and it was so bizarre to me, to my teammates, to my coach, that I would cave in competition. I would be like setting records in practice, but I would cave. And so I had to look at that. I got to look at that and say, like, what's up with that? And how do I turn that around? So, because that's when the rubber meets the road. And that's whether it's in business or whether it's in anything.
Mhm.
There's so many principles there, and even just in life, like on a day-to-day basis, how do we get it to the point where the best version of us shows up when it counts?
Yeah. So there's a lot there. um, so I'm going to jump in and talk about, well, I'll go with the beliefs because so there's a reason why you're there. It could be luck, it could be talent, it could be a bunch of things, but somewhere along the line you had this idea that either you could do it, that it was possible, or something else, right? So we have these beliefs about ourselves, I can, about the world, they are, and about about ourselves, I can, about others, they are, and about the world, this is, whether that's situational or more global. And the one thing that I work on with people specifically even at the elite level is there's a sense that they don't, in many cases, there's a sense that they don't quite belong, that they shouldn't be there or here.
Mm-hmm. Kind of the imposter syndrome.
Yeah. And I don't like using that term because it focuses on the not belonging side, like imposter. It's like, no, that's you, man. And I always use this analogy of, hey, look, Olympic athlete. I said, you watch. Funny, I'm not going to. Usually, Will Smith is the one that comes up, but as an example, because he's always a great character in a movie. But anyways, so I said, you watched a movie, yeah? I asked stupid questions. You watch movies? Yes. You ever watch superhero movies? Sure. Okay, who's your favorite character? Blah blah blah. Okay, great. Well, in that movie, right? Did Tom Cruise or Will Smith or whoever the character was, did they laugh? Yeah. Did they cry? Yes. Did they get their feelings hurt? Yes. Did they get beat up? Yes. All these things, right? And so did they, we could imagine that they showered and went to the bathroom and all these other things, right? Just very normal, benign things. Yet they're still that person, right? They're still that character.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, can you get into character, right? Can you actually be the person you want to be? Because that's you as well.
Yes.
And I think, and you hear things, especially coming back from the Olympics. I'm always, when I'm on Instagram and after an Olympics, people are coming home saying, oh, well, time to get back to reality. It's like, no, like, don't you get it? You actually went there. This is your life.
Yes.
And if you can normalize that, then it's more powerful.
It's a different level.
Right. Not only that, but if high becomes normal,
yes,
right, it ceases to be this big thing, right? It is, because you're not an idiot and you're human. However, if you can normalize your competition or the level that you play at, even if it's at the highest level ever, if you can normalize that, then that's a couple percentage points less pressure that you're going to be dealing with. There's a couple percentage points in expectation, not only of outcome, but of what you're going to do in the situation. And that's how we split hairs. That's the game we're playing.
I love that.
It's really about belonging there. I mean, I always say, I made a living beating people better than me. Honestly, like, they were better than me at riding a bike, but I was a better racer, right?
Yeah.
On that day, I can show up and race better. Mm-hmm. And that's what matters. That's the metric. Even with I'm going to a USA Cycling camp in a couple weeks. And my whole thing is going to be about them belonging there, and them and the metric of how you do when it counts. That's the metric. Because I think people look at, to your point, I did great in practice, and they want things to kind of line up. And sure, you want to see yourself progressing, and sure, you want to check the boxes, but there's something else. There's a reason why we line up. There's a reason why we the clock gets turned on, right? And that's to actually find out. And And that's the person that I want. That's the measurement that I'm looking for, that we want to see. Because at the end of the day, my practice doesn't need to be the best, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing too is life, you can make room for life to happen, especially in sport. Somebody's going to fall. Somebody's going to make a mistake. Somebody else is going to choke. There's all these things in play. And if you can kind of like channel that, right, and allow that to be part of the plan, not expect it or hope for it, but just kind of recognize that that's part of the game too. The bad officiating and the unfair calls and the unfair track and the fact that the surface is uneven, all of that is part of the game, right? So if you recognize that everything is in play and you are a character, right, in that story that shows up a certain way, regardless of how he or she feels, regardless if you're running, pulling up your pants with toilet paper hanging up to the line, you can still be that person on the line, then my money's on you.
Yeah. I just had a visual there. I was like, did that actually happen? I'm sure it has.
It has, not to me, but it has happened.
So what I heard in that was normalize excellence.
Normalize to neutralize.
Yes, I love that. And when you don't have these low points,
Mm-hmm.
And I think about the difference between people that consistently outperform, consistently grow and succeed, whether it's in sports or whether it's in business or whatever, is they understand, to your point about the village, they understand that their environment, their association, the distractions all makes an impact. So it's not like, oh, I can just go do this thing that is going to will bring me down, but it's cool. I can do it. I can afford to do it. They don't want to even bother to do that because they're normalizing, like you said, to neutralize and not have to do these highs and lows and then gear themselves up every time. And so there's a great lesson there for leaders or aspiring entrepreneurs. It's like, what if you were just to operate and choose to normalize excellence and it's just a way of being? Now you don't have to gear yourself up, to ramp yourself up to get to that point, because that takes more energy. And it's like taking your foot off the gas pedal on the gas pedal. It's like you're cruising at a different level.
Want consistency. You want consistency. And it's funny. So winning is actually ugly. Okay. So that's one thing that throws people off. Because you picture getting the check and you picture the hugs and the crying and the money and the whatever, the winning. And that part is pretty, but the actual winning,
what it takes,
how it actually happens is ugly. Like the blood, the sweat, the tears, the guts, all of that, the hits, like it's you gut it out, which is fine, by the way. So there's that. And then I think the other thing is that people think that it's something else, right? That it's this it's this other. But the truth is, as you matriculate up, right? I'm not going to say it doesn't get harder. It does. However, mathematically, the odds shift into your favor, right? So as a I don't know, 10, 12-year-old kid, and I say, I want to be pro world champion, most of my friends are like, yeah, right. But guess what? I had to get through just age to get to the point to turn pro. Then I get through all those people who are in front of me of just, whether there was skills or just literally amounts of people. There's just more people to get through. But then I actually turned pro. Boom, right? So I age, I'm 17. Now I'm of age. Okay, great. Math just got better. And then now I'm pro. Wow. So all those people who didn't pro are not there. So once you're at the top of the tip of the pencil, there's literally less to contend with. If you think about any sport or anything, they're not interviewing 20 people to be CEO. They're probably interviewing 2. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Maybe 3.
Yeah.
Like that's the deal. And probably the person who they wanted, they don't even interview. They just pick them. And then it's like, oh, he didn't want it. So let's find these other 2 candidates. So when I got to see it like this, like, wait, this is, because the work is the same. The work is the same. For me to qualify through to the final or whatever it is, it still requires me to get fourth or better in my sport. It still requires me to go on time out of the gate. It still requires me to ride the track a certain way. And it's been like that since the dawn of the sport till right now, Olympic level. The work is the same. And I think people make the mistake of thinking it becomes something different as you go up. I mean, don't get me wrong. It might mean more as you get further up. More might be on the line as you get further up, but the work is the same. Success, so winning is ugly. Success is actually a little bit boring. And if you think about it, how many swings does Tiger Woods take? Or I'm trying to think of another golfer, Rory McIlroy or something like that. Anyways, but how many swings does they take? How many hits, balls did, Serena and Venus return from a ball machine, right? Forget the coach. I mean, it's actually boring. It's just this repetitive motion, right? Habitual.
Yeah.
And
it's that 1%, it's that 0.5%, it's that subtle improvement that can make all the difference.
Correct.
But I love what you're saying here, because I know sometimes people are afraid to imagine. So sometimes when I'm coaching people, I'll say, like, get the idea of whatever that outcome is and what problem can that create. And then all this stuff comes up. It's like, yeah, I want that, but. And there's all these fears and these concerns and these considerations, because, and of course, that's what's holding them back from actually getting it, because they're pushing it away. And so when you realize that it's actually, when you say it's harder, but it's easier in a way, that the field gets smaller, then it allows people to look at it differently, to say, well, maybe I could do that. It feels like when you're starting out, oh, there's no way that I could ever do that.
Yeah, it's a big mountain.
There's this huge mountain. But when you're incrementally just consistent and you're moving up that mountain, it actually gets easier. And it's in a sense that you can believe it more. Coming back to that belief, you can believe it more for yourself. And so, I think there's a lot of people that can't imagine themselves being at a pinnacle of business or whatever the case is. But then, they just need to do the next right thing.
Yeah.
Next right thing.
I can tell you why they can't imagine. It's in my experience. They can't imagine it because, and it's not entirely they. And when I say they, I mean us humans, our fault, because we tend to think we need to be like, we tend to think the pinnacle is one. We tend to think the best is one. We tend to think success is a very specific kind of formula of whatever that looks like, whether it's a certain house or certain car or certain life. And it's like, no. So that's the other thing that frees you up. Once you realize you literally can define your success, like, hey, you might not want a house on the hill. Cool. But if you are in your head thinking you have to have one, but you kind of don't want it because it just doesn't jive with you, that is enough of a disconnect to have you feeling a kind of way that's not going to help you just daily or, quarterly or yearly. It's just gonna be like, something's off, something's missing. But if you could be honest with yourself, I always say there's plenty of fat, happy people. And I'm not saying that to disparage or shame anyone. I'm just saying that, like, look, you don't have to lose the last 5 pounds.
Yeah.
Okay. You just don't have to. It's literally like your choice. You don't have to drive a certain car. You don't have to. I mean, you can define your success. You can get rid of the stuff, right, that you've either been fed or that you thought needed to happen or whatever to kind of have this picture in your head. And really, if you can go inside and say, okay, what matters to me, right, to my family? What's important to me? How do I want to live? Who do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to be? And shoot for that. You've just eliminated so much other distraction. And you literally can live in the bubble, your own bubble.
Yeah.
Right. And that's great, because just guess what? Not everybody wants to be president. I mean, if you think about it, it's a I mean, there's just not that many people that are going to run.
Yes.
The mayor of my city, I can't remember how many elections ago, and I just noted, I just happened to see it in the paper, ran unopposed. I'm like, oh my gosh. Right?
Wow.
And if I was really gaming the system, right, I could have ran for mayor. And my odds of making it would have been pretty good, because why? Because I would be the only other person, right? So the other thing to competition is like recognizing it's still a game. It's still, you could still kind of play at this thing. But my point is, not everybody wants what you want, right?
Yeah.
But when we get caught up on the Facebook scroll and the Instagram scroll, and we think, okay, everybody wants this, let everybody fight for that.
Yeah.
I'm going for this over here. So that's the other thing with my racing career is like, you know, and I'm open with it, especially to kids. Like, look, I wasn't that good. I was good. I was a good racer, but I wasn't that good. I said, there's a lot of kids that were better than me. There were a lot of kids, but along the way they fell off. Why did they fall off? Well, because some of them didn't want to say after high school, didn't want to keep investing in themselves. Some of them actually believed they couldn't do this because they had to, I'm using quotes, had to do something else because of what other kind of conditioned belief you have, right? Then there's injury. And then there's, maybe they found another sport that they're more passionate about. So a lot of people just kind of got out of the way for me.
Yeah.
To kind of, they just made way for me. So literally it was just like kind of my turn to a certain degree. I just stuck with it, and it's interesting having, traveling the world as a pro and then going to these places where I might run into that person that I raced at 15-year-old or 14, like, oh man. And you hear, I should have stuck with it, or da-da-da-da-da, or, you can even see a little bit of disbelief. It's like, man, you're the guy who's, because, because it's like, they used to beat me maybe.
Yeah.
But if you can learn to play the long game, learn what metrics are important, and then figure out what to do that actually moves the needle, you're going to save yourself a lot of time and energy. Okay. And so when you save yourself time and energy, what are you really doing? You are relieving yourself of stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
Because you're a human. You're built like we worry. We're worry machines. Okay. We don't want to die. Okay. When you send your kids out there, you don't want them to get hurt. Like you want to live. So you're going to worry anyway. Right? So why not worry about the things that matter or the things that will move the needle? And there's my dog telling me I got to let her out. Hold on real quick. So sorry. You were supposed to stay with me, buddy. There we go. Yeah. So there you go. And then life happens. But yeah, worry about the things that actually move the needle. I'm not going to ask you not to worry, but I can say, let's rearrange your playing field so that we're working to our strengths and we're playing in a way that's allowing us to be, I don't want to say productive, effective. Yeah. Effective, right? Effective in our work, effective in our play, and effective with the people that we actually like to be around or need to be around.
Yeah. So there's busy and there's productive and then there's effective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And playing the long game. That's very interesting because how many times have we seen, and I know that for myself, it's like sometimes you're just staying in it long enough. And, in the beginning, people are like, you still doing that thing? You still doing that thing? They don't ask that after a while. They're like, she's in it or he's in it, and then it's, I always talk about its visibility, its credibility, and its consistency.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is really good. Before we wrap up, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about the transition, and I do want to also touch on your book.
Oh yeah.
Flat out, congratulations. Your book coming out. And so transition, just real quick. You made this transition, of course, retiring, deciding what you were going to do next. And we were talking previously, and we had this great little conversation around how people get stuck in the transition, stuck in the past versus being able to embrace and move forward. Can you speak to that from a mindset standpoint, what it takes when that time comes and you are transitioning? How can you successfully transition to the next thing? Because sometimes people feel like I'm on the pinnacle here and now I'm over here and starting out, or, they're looking back too much that they can't even.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it, part of it is personality based, right? Some of us are more accepting of change than others.
Yes.
And that's kind of a typology, if you will. That said, people changes can be scary. Uncertainty, we don't like too much uncertainty. Otherwise it frazzles us. but specifically with athletes, or even people who've done a thing for a long time and it's time to do something else, or they can't do the thing they were doing, it's really how they identify. And it's really important that, and that's why I say, rearrange your playing field. And when I say, effective in your business, effective in your play, effective with the people, is because if we're only effective in our work, and I mean, I think there's a lot of people like that. It's actually and the reason why is because money keeps our life moving. It's an easy metric. You know how much you made or didn't make, and it's also safe, right? Because once you get into a certain place, you can kind of just do that and put your head down and go to work and not really observe, right? So we can kind of even sedate ourselves with work, right? But if you can expand that field and really kind of like, business, sport, life, or better, happier, then you actually you have the ability to say, oh, wow, I'm capable at X, right? This is who I am and what I value. What can I bring of me into this new thing that I want to investigate or do or invest in, right? And then you can show up that way. And for me, I mean, I was a BMX racer guy, and I always went to school, but I mean, as soon as I got out, I said, okay, now I'm gonna be Dr. Jansen. I'm gonna plug myself back in. Like I kind of knew I could be that guy for action sports people, and then parlay that into business and speaking. But my standard was still, okay, how do I become as good of a psychologist as I was a bike racer? That was my standard, right? So I was still bringing the racer into this thing, right? And so you can,
it's who you are.
I could bring my character, right?
Yes.
Into the new profession. Yeah, there was some remediation. I didn't know how to be a psychologist before I became a psychologist. So what? Right? You didn't know how to be a husband before you became a husband. You don't know how to be a kid before you become like it. Just that's part of the deal. But we get discouraged because we're looking at the whole mountain we have to climb versus like the 2 steps in front of us.
Yeah.
And then we get discouraged if we have to backtrack. And one thing I learned after breaking my femur in 2006 and actually going to school as I was racing was that, man, time happens regardless of me. Right. So do I want to have X done in 2 years' time? Do I want to be this in 2 or 3 years' time or not? Right. Because I could always change my mind. And I know that sounds crazy to spend as much as you spend on a doctorate and then change your mind. But guess what? Like I'm not going to know otherwise if I don't go down the path. And I fully trust that if I go down the path, I'll find the thing that I'm either more meant to do or better suited for. Right.
Yeah. There's no mistakes. There's just lessons. You're learning the lessons. I hear that a lot, not with entrepreneurs. You're like, oh, I made that mistake. I made this mistake. And, it set me back. It's like, but did you make a mistake or did you learn something? You tried something out that maybe
it's allowed to be both. It's allowed to be both.
Yeah.
I mean, because so the other thing is like, follow your own advice.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that entrepreneur you're working with, if they were mentoring somebody else, they would have a lot of forget gold nuggets, gold bars, right? To give somebody, regardless of how successful they were. So follow your own advice. And it's so interesting that we don't give ourselves the grace that we give others, right?
Yes.
To make those mistakes. And we don't, it's actually unfair that we hold sometimes these different standards. Well, I can't make any mistake, right? I have to be perfect. It's like, well, good luck with that. But by the way, you don't have to be perfect. My theory is you don't have to be perfect because you already are perfect, even though you have some imperfections.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So and I show, that's another thing I do. I show like winning laps or winning fights or winning to a lot of athletes. And I ask them to count the mistakes that are made. And because a lot of the people that I work with are young, they might not have seen those events. And it's like, yeah, that was a world champion lap. Yeah, that's a gold, that's a ring, right? That performance. So do you want the perfect lap or do you want to win?
Yeah.
Do you want to make no mistakes or do you want to win? Right?
That's good. That's good, Jason. I love it. Tell us about your book.
So the book, More, Better, Happier, that is, It is my jam. So it basically spawned off of this thousands of conversations with people. And and I'm sure you can even attest to this as someone who works with people and you're a service professional. It's like the person who comes to you wants one thing. And it's, usually in the success realm, right? I want more. I want the office, the money, the VC, the whatever it might be. That's what I want. Or as a psychologist, they want better, right? They want to feel better. They want to be more healthy. They want to be, whatever it is, better, right? There's some kind of skill set, especially athletes. I want to become faster. I want to become stronger. I want to become mentally strong, right? And then there's the third group, which is, man, I have everything on paper. Everything looks great, but how come I feel like something's missing? Or my husband isn't really present, or my wife isn't nice to me anymore, or my family, strained relationships, or everything looks good on paper, but I'm not happy. And I realized, like, man, everybody's like coming for these one thing, but why do they want that one thing? Right? Like, why do they want the office or the raise? Why do they want the abs or the higher the higher jump, right? Why is it affecting them so much that they haven't talked to their college roommate in over 10 years? And it's like, what are you really getting at? And what I came to the conclusion that it's like everyone is asking for the wrong thing. It's almost like we're scared to ask for that thing we really want. I don't know what the one thing is. You can describe it, but to me, it has to be, and I don't say have too often, but it has to be us playing to all of that, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like backing out and saying, okay, like all of these line items matter, right? They're not separate P&Ls. It's actually one P&L.
Yes.
Right. And that's more, better, happier. Right. And because in order for you to get more, guess what? It requires you to be better. Right. And none of that matters unless, like, you do have quality relationships. And I mean quality relationships, whether it's friendships or familial or romantic, but quality relations, people that like you care about and you want to see them succeed. Right. And that's the field that I want people to play. It's funny. I mean, I'm a sports performance psychologist guy, but this book, I think there's like 2 references in there that I use. I don't say I closed my eyes, but I really channeled this. I just like got in my space and just started writing. And it's funny because when I started writing the dedication, which was essentially to my kids / and wife, it ended up becoming a chapter, and it's, so that's why it's a psychologist's letter to his kids disguised as leadership. But that's the deal. I mean, there is a template in there. There is a very specific template. And it begins, with some pattern interrupts. And I talk about what's going on in our world and the ridiculousness of it and our conversation. And I do that not to choose sides or solve the world's problems, but I do that so that we can look at our behavior and go, it's not making sense. Or why am I doing this? And why does that headline bother me so much? But like, maybe I should look at my own headline that I'm creating.
Yes.
Right? And maybe I should, maybe it would be good for me to create my own headline, right? That's like more in alignment with the kind of life I want to lead. And then it's like, all right, how do I do that? Well, according to Jason, this is how he does it. And there's, you could pick everything or you could pick one thing. My hope is that if you get one thing from this, then I've succeeded. Even if it's to push back and say, oh, that's a bunch of crap, it needs to be like this, I've done my job. Because then I know you're thinking and your wheels are turning. Yeah. So that's more, better, happier.
Awesome. Well, and it's that awareness. It's know thyself and choose your life.
And it's super action oriented. Because I'm all about the doing. Yeah. Because we have beliefs, and some of them we fabricate some of them to fill in the blanks because we don't know everything. And some of them, they're just kind of born into us, whether it's through family or culture or whatever. But you can change what you do, right? You can make different choices. You can start brushing your teeth with your left hand versus your right. Those are things that are actually, and then once you start doing that, the results will start to shift, right? And then once you start getting different results, you literally experience and see, and you get the proof that, oh, maybe some of the stuff I was thinking about how things are not how they are.
Yeah.
And that's how we kind of shift that cycle.
Yeah. That's awesome. Jason, thank you so much. Oh, there's so many things we could talk about here. We're going to leave it there. And I'm going to encourage our listeners to go get a copy of your book, More, Better, Happier. And we'll make sure the links are in the show notes. Of course, it's on Amazon. And of course, your website, drjasonrichardson.com. We'll make sure that's on the links. And of course, your Instagram. And we just really appreciate you being here and sharing your perspective on this champion's mindset from somebody who's been in the game and is now continuing and helping others in the game. It's one thing to be a great player and a great athlete. It's another thing to teach other people and help them to be great athletes. And so I appreciate you bringing that to us today.
Well, thanks for having me on the show. It was great.
It was a pleasure. So, and I always say, and we just started talking about action, I always say that leaders of transformation take action. Nothing happens until you do something. It's great to listen to, podcasts and all this wonderful material and read books and so forth, but it's when you apply it in your life that's where the transformation happens. And so I encourage you to do that today. Go on, get a copy of Jason's book, even review this, listen to this again. There's so many nuggets, gold bars in this conversation that Jason has shared, and extract it and sit down and to say, how can I apply that to my life right now where I am? If you like this also, of course, share it with somebody else. Maybe there's somebody that's feeling a little down, maybe a little bit like they've had a setback and they don't know how to get out. They're in a little bit of a funk. Then send this to them. Maybe it'll be that encouragement, that impetus for them to move forward and move on. So we'd love for you to do that. And we, of course, would love to hear how this has impacted you. So you can go on leadersoftransformation.com and you can reach out to us there. Of course, you can follow us on social as well. And of course, this is episode 420 something. So, we've got over 400 episodes that are there. So the whole library of our previous episodes are all on leadersoftransformation.com. And so you can take advantage of that as well. So lots of great information to help you become the leader of transformation that you're capable of being. And I encourage you to do so because I believe that every single person is capable of being a difference maker and a world changer in your own right, in your own way. Your game, play your game, and play the long game. So I encourage you that. Thank you for being here. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.